first thing on our agenda is the presentation for the town employee insurance renewal from the Masardi Group and Rand Williams. Rand, the floor is all yours.
It's good to see everybody in person. It's been a while. Hopefully, for the most part, we've got some good news, but some of my slides, forgive me if they're a little bit technical. We won't have to read through every single one of them word by word, but at the same time, don't hesitate, raise your hand with questions. I'll pause and ask, or you can hold them to the end. Now, if we'll go here, I think we're good to go. Okay, so as most of you know, your health plan has been with Cigna. Now, this will be our third year. Just last year, we moved the dental plan over to Cigna. And unfortunately, Cigna has lost the bet, so to speak. We continue to have more claims paid out than they collect in premiums. But there's a little more of a story to tell this year. Each year, your claims are driven a lot of times by 2 or 3 higher risk individuals. It's just not ever been the same 2 or 3. It tends to cycle into a new condition or new claimant. But as you can see from this slide, the amount that has been spent over what they project is significant again in the last 9 months or the last 12 months. It is a little bit better than it was when we were meeting last year. But at the same time, your plan, it is a unique plan. It's something called level funded. The easiest way to explain that is you're technically self-insured behind the scenes, but you're not taking on any risk. You have the employee-only, employee-spouse rates. It feels exactly the same as if you were fully insured, as you used to be with First Carolina Care and many others. The good news about this type of plan, though, is if you have certain things happen with your claims, and there's money left over at the end of the year, you can potentially receive some of that back. And I'll get into that in a little more detail, but just to mention it for the moment, it's in the context when it looks so ugly on these first 2 bullets of all the money going out versus what they're collecting. They do have a reinsurance that says no single member has to incur over $50,000 on Cigna's dime. Once it gets beyond 50, that individual's claims are paid by reinsurance for the rest of the plan year. So when you have one claimant with $300,000-$400,000, it's not that should be the exact calculation in how your renewal rates are determined. It is a function of how your renewal rates are determined. But this year, Cigna's initial number was uglier than, well, it was about the same as the prior year. If you remember last year, really as a result of COVID, and although our claims were so poor, the health insurance carriers as a whole did a little bit better in the early stages of COVID. They were handing out, as part of negotiations, one-time, what we call them bill credits. Sometimes I refer to them as bribes. Your rates have to go up this much, but we'll at least pay you a big old credit on your first bill, and now the increase is only this amount. So as nice as that was, the problem is they get to keep collecting more and more money, and that's only a one-time thing. One thing this year we tried to focus more on was the lowest premium increase possible. Even though these credits are still available, we went about it a little bit differently. And so despite all the things you see here, and we talk about a surplus, if we'll go to the next slide, really, when they look at what renewal increase to give you as a snapshot, they're weighting the last 24 months, but they weight really the last 9 to 12 months more than anything. So since we negotiated last year's renewal, the column on the left are the claim projections they think as a whole under the reinsurance your people would spend on each or any given month on average. The column on the right shows the actual dollars that were spent, but again, under the 50,000. You're not going to have these really large claimants show up on this page here that were part of those numbers on the first page. So this is the first year we've actually wanted to talk to you more about a surplus. As ugly as it seems when you talk about loss ratios, your overall claims under the reinsurance have started coming in right around or a little bit below what they project. And to get these surplus checks, or returns of your money, however you want to consider them, you do also have to renew with Cigna. The problem is we have to make these decisions while there's still another month or two left in the plan year, and you could have one new claim wipe out the surplus. So outside of just talking about getting them to agree to a lower premium, just as much we thought, instead of these bill credits, let's see if they can guarantee some of these surplus dollars. So even though as of today, even though May is not completely done, just through May 23rd, your claims did tick back up in the month of May compared to the previous 2 months. But assuming some things over the next week or so in May, you might potentially be eligible to receive a $9,800 and some change in surplus in about the third month after you renew with Cigna. Now, at the same time, they have agreed to guarantee you will get a surplus of at least $7,500 no matter what happens over the next 2 months. So we consider that a win, and just in the scheme of things, dollars that we've been able to save or have, you may have a good claims month in June, and instead you could get a $12,000 surplus or 15. We don't really know what will happen, but at least we know no matter what happens, the smallest amount you'll get in the surplus is $7,500. So a little bit technical, but does anybody have any questions on how I explain that? Anything about level funded? Or we'll just talk about the premiums, which I'm sure everybody's interested in seeing. We'll keep moving along then. So if we go to the next slide, really just to give you a visual of the negotiations, it did feel a little bit different this year. The initial number being 26% is really in some ways it's what the computer spits out. We hate to even make that call to Tammy or Corey because the number's always going to come down a good amount, but a lot of that has to do with what is the actual risk going forward. They may have lost the bet in the last 9 months again, but what really matters is what do we expect to happen the next 12 months. And some of your claims and your highest claimants were improving for one reason or another. We were able to get them to acknowledge that, and the fact that your overall claims were trending in the right direction when each time we've been in these negotiations, they've been trending in the wrong direction, or we found out about a new something that they know about to point to. So all that, when we met with Tammy and Corey, when we first had the renewal, the expectation was, hey, we think this is going to be, a lot better renewal. We still want to go to market to keep Cigna honest, whether that be the Blue Cross, Blue Cross, Aetna, United, different carriers, First Carolina Care, and some other alternative solutions. But at the same time, the market kind of tells us, is their offer really a fair offer, whatever that may be? We were really surprised that nobody in the market was able to offer anything better than an 18% increase above your renewal. And in most cases, that hurts our leverage to an extent when you're not at least representing the idea that we might have to go somewhere else. But we have been very pleased with Cigna's willingness to work with us, and as a result, the final number after a few rounds and that surplus guarantee is now 8%. So all in all, especially because of what we've seen industry-wide, unfortunately with COVID, insurance companies probably made a little too much money when it first started, but it's all kind of started catching up. The wave of Delta really hurt. Y'all have had about 2 or 3 COVID-related hospitalizations. The average one of those is about $45,000. We don't think that should feel the same because Omicron looks a lot different than Delta did, but who knows when the next variant comes along. But more really even than that, it's the elective care that was being deferred, potential back surgeries, you're going to the emergency room, whatever it might be. Nobody was really doing any of that for a good period of 2020 and half of 2021. Once vaccinations came along, people started catching up that kind of activity. So the loss ratios, not just for your people, but industry-wide, have corrected, so to speak, and we're seeing higher increases than normal. So at 8%, we don't like any increase, but I think we've talked, and Virginia's probably budgeted in the past around 10%. Our goal is always to hopefully somehow beat whatever it is you budget for or whatever the benchmark industry-wide for a similar demographic. And so we feel like we've gotten there a little bit differently than we usually would, but it is a fair offer, seeing where the rest of the market priced your risk, and ultimately knowing a lot of the things that are still going on and expect to have claims spend over the next 12 months. And so what that looks like on dollars and cents, one thing just to point out, the plan that we are proposing to renew is the same plan. We're not tweaking any deductibles or co-pays. Occasionally, any insurance company can update their drug list and decide a couple times a year, we may not cover this drug, or now we'll cover that one. That's out of our control, but nothing major going on there that we're aware of either. So for the same plans that are available to your people today, the numbers you see here, factoring in that guaranteed surplus, it would be a net of about a 6.3% total increase. 8% if you're not counting the surplus, but at least we know that's real money that will come to you. And then when it comes to what the town contributes towards these premiums, the cost would go up $65,358, more just based on a snapshot of your population today, which has been very steady over the years we've worked with you, amounting to almost an 8% increase. And this is assuming y'all would vote to approve that employee costs remain the same, that the town would pay 100% of the employee only, and that anyone covering family members would see the same per paycheck deduction despite the increase going up. And one of the things we talked about, a lot of times we'll show different scenarios. What if y'all shared in the increase? Are there different reasons or ways to offset the potential increase? Honestly, I think it was pretty clear from Tammy after talking with Virginia, you have so much inflation across this entire economy. The last thing we wanted to do was recommend passing on dollars to your people, and then ultimately knowing that what you've done as long as I've known you is had this commitment to paying 100% of the employee only. That would be a big shift that we'd prefer not to ever have to do, but may want to save for a year if we're facing something more catastrophic. So overall, the cost, the plans you see in front of you, it's our recommendation to renew with Cigna for medical and maintain those employee costs. And we're seeing that as, despite whatever the increases may be, we're seeing most employers kind of take that mindset, whether it's inflation or the hiring challenges. Not a whole lot of people want to all of a sudden give bad news to their employees and give them a reason to, want to go work somewhere else, or just not have enough money to pay their bills. It's already hard enough for other reasons. Any questions on what I've explained there, or our recommendation on the medical?
Yeah, Ram, how much did you say our, the town, increase would be?
So on the bottom right corner, it would, assuming you were willing to have the employee-only costs remain the same, the town would be annualized, and this factors in that $7,500 that you would get back, but net after that $65,358. Yeah, I don't blame you for that reaction, and we unfortunately gotten used to it. And all I can say is, we really feel fortunate that it didn't go the other direction because of where the market came in, and still having Cigna negotiated down this far. But the good old days with the First Carolina Cares and the 0% and the negatives, I feel like we could be headed in that direction, or at least closer, but the last 2.5 years, it's been a little bit of a damage control, and to the extent of, we're happy that we can get to single digits, but I'm not so sure it's even warranted. Maybe realistically, 15% is probably, if you're an actuary, what they say you would deserve. But, another good thing about these plans, we can see the claims. When we're negotiating renewals and fully insured, a lot of times employers under 100, it's more of a horse trading. We're needing this much, and the only way you can get them down is if you threaten to leave. But when we know exactly the money that's being spent, the diagnosis, the drugs that are being taken, it's pretty easy for us to understand, are you getting a good deal or not, or how to get you the best deal possible.
How much of an increase is that over last year?
So last year, it was 12% and some change, but it was a really hefty admin credit against the first bill, and the net effect of that got it down to around 8%. So back to the beginning when I was saying, you know, we could have certainly created that scenario again, but then your rates go up 12% instead of 8%. We might prefer, you know, the lower rates because it's such an exponential factor every year.
How much of the expenditures that we had this year, if you know that answer, would be accredited to COVID?
So going on memory, three claimants that were COVID related that were hospital involved, and I believe,
I know we had one very large one.
yeah, one of them might have been around 80 and the other two between 30 and 40. I know that the one large one was a little bit of an outlier. And that's part of why the initial number really doesn't mean a whole lot, because those aren't, that shouldn't have anything to do with the next 12 months. You know. Sure, somebody else or same people could have that happen again, but they shouldn't automatically get to price it in to assume that it will.
One of them it won't happen again, because he died Thursday.
And
I'm looking at this right, you're saying that an employee plus his family that's $283 per pay period?
per pay period, that's correct. And that's, I believe, been that way for as long as I can remember, just that y'all have been able to, you know, find other areas in the budget when we've seen increases to hold those levels. We've kind of talked about the idea of changing them, but I think it's still generous or competitive, so to speak, but I know it's a lot of money for people who are, you know, hourly wages.
Quick question, I mean, so you're an independent y'all are an independent group that looks for the best deal going for communities like Edenton, right?
Correct.
And you looked at overall everything there is, and you think this is the best deal?
And that was what was surprising. Usually we can get a few horses in the race, and between Blue Cross, Aetna, First Carolina Care, United Healthcare, and a couple of self-insured outlets, nobody was willing to offer anything better than 18%.
So the numbers are, the market, the industry average is around 18%, and this is 8%?
For your population, correct. If you wanted to talk industry average in the state of North Carolina, I'd say it's more like a 9.5% average increase, but you'd more want to drill down to what about the comparable demographic of people that are in your region with similar ages. It's probably closer to 12% this year because of this, you know, COVID effect that's been going on. But it's, you know, we don't love these insurance companies any more than y'all do. We just try to beat them down and put them against each other. And ultimately, there may be a point where there's an argument to become self-insured so you can make some of your own rules. And we talked about that a little bit this year, but it kind of went back to, you know, is this really the year to make, or to create, we call it disruption, but to change a lot of things in your people's lives in the midst of everything else going on. Honestly, prescription drug costs are the biggest driver of everything continuing to spiral out of control. We used to talk about hospital prices, and that's certainly still a factor, but the specialty drugs that are used for chronic conditions, things like arthritis, hepatitis, HIV, I'm not saying that any of your people have those specific conditions, but as a whole, a lot of these types of drugs are $4,000 or $5,000 a month or more. So when you do the math in the scheme of things, until our industry is willing, able to, you know, address that, it's really hard to promise that it's going to look anything different this time next year, unless we have the luck of the draw that, you know, ultimately, as we're under this type of plan or fully insured, you just don't have a whole lot of control. And cancer drugs, for that matter. I mean, a lot of these drugs, they work better than the next one, and people, it can save their lives. So it's not as much about let's not cover these drugs. Well, how can we get our industry in the US to somehow bring these drug costs down or regulate in a certain way. Maybe, I'm not a fan of all regulation, but something has to change in the prescription drug space, or else an employer of your size may need to take some matters into your own hands. That's just my personal opinion. And your total claims that you see here, about 33 or 4% are now made up of just drug expenses. And when we were talking 5 years ago, that number was maybe 10%.
So this will be the third year we have Cigna for the company.
Correct.
Okay. Corey, I have a question. Is the feedback good? I mean, has it been a good company for our employees? Are they happy with it?
We really haven't had any issues since the very first transition, once everyone got their prescriptions changed over from when we went to Cigna 3 years ago. I mean, I think all of the dust really settled at that point, and this time I think most folks have gotten used to it.
Matt, in the new budget, what did you estimate for the increase? Does this fit in with your thinking, or?
We estimated 10% increase.
And so you could fall below the 10% without changing these employee costs, not by a ton, but certainly it was looking a little bit uglier early on. And even when we saw the other carriers come back the way they did, I had to grab Tammy and say, we need to take this and run with it before they change their mind, because we really didn't have any leverage to get them any lower. But we like Cigna. Yeah, they do a good job in terms of being hands-on when something does go awry. We can admit maybe they're a little bit more sticklers on prior approvals for MRIs or PET scans every once in a while. Those types of things all carriers are doing, but Cigna just seems to do a little bit more. But they don't necessarily do quite as much of the red tape in prescriptions and some other just physical therapy and the things that we hear about. And the network is, we haven't had any complaints about the network that I know of.
And Corey, does the administration go along with the recommendation that Rand has made?
Tammy and I both agree this is our best option at this time, yes.
And with everything our employees are having to face out in the market right now, gas prices and inflation, if we can afford it and we've got the money, I can't vote. I mean, that's a lot of money, but I can't vote to pass it along to folks with everything that's going on right now.
And we can discuss that in further detail tomorrow with our finance committee meeting. But I agree. I think it's the right thing to do for all 73 employees.
What are we doing now? Just voting on whether or not to go with Cigna again, and then we'll figure out the details during the budget process?
And just real quick, we also had the dental with Cigna, but we had negotiated a 2-year rate guarantee, so same exact plan, same exact costs. So if you're thinking of it in terms of your total benefit spend, percentage-wise, you could factor in the dental as well. There was a little bump in the road when we changed to Cigna with how they set up something without a network. We went ahead and we caught it and had them reprocess all those claims, and those people eventually were made whole, and nobody else, I don't think, is really running into that since then. But nothing to really discuss on that benefit. Other benefits that you offer through the SOAR group, more supplemental with Sun Life and Guardian, things like your voluntary life insurance or disability. Those will have no cost increases. They are really, it's possible if somebody hits a new age bracket on 1 or 2 of them, they can shift up in cost, but that only happens once every 5 years and not on all of those plans. So we recommended that those be renewed or continue to be offered, and y'all also have some Aflac and some similar benefits that cross over, and really we're not a part of that conversation, and I think your people are happy with Aflac.
motion?
And so all we need is a motion and a second to move forward with the, Sorenson Group's recommendation to stay with Sigma. And then we will work out all the financial details tomorrow during our finance.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion, and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carried. We will stick with Sigma.
Thank you for everybody's time. I hope we can level the ship and have just go in the other direction. I know this is a couple tough years, but maybe parity will work out. We'll see what happens. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rand. We appreciate your time and your efforts to try to keep the rates as low as you can. We appreciate it.
Well, thank y'all for your business. Y'all are great to work with. We'll keep battling for you.
Okay, our next item is, a presentation by the Edenton Police Department and LSAG Street Century Plate Reader Trial. Is Chief King here?
Yes, he's in the hall.
Okay. Hey, Chief.
Good morning, good evening, I'm sorry for the long day. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The vendor is actually on the airplane, to LAPD to do the same thing that he wants to do here tonight, so I'll just step in and, explain to the council. So, the company, Leonardo Company, they sell license plate readers, and they can be attached on a pole, or they can be attached in on the ground on a separate pole. But since we are a utility city, we can attach these things to our pole, and they're solar based, so they run off the sun. So the only thing that we would need is a SIMS card with unlimited data. So what I would like to do is, if council approves it, is to do a 30-day trial. No money being spent for it, except for me purchasing the SIMS card through Verizon, which we already have Verizon already for our police air cards. To be able to see exactly what this product does, what it say it does, and then we can actually have opportunity to let citizens, so let me use an example. I'll just use where Ms. Anne Marie Knight lives at. The community has an opportunity, if they want to lease this same type of equipment to go into cul-de-sacs and communities. So it's just not all related to the police. Communities can purchase this for 8 home association neighborhoods, but they won't have access to license plates data like the police would. So in other words, they wouldn't be able to know that ABC 1234 belonged to Henry King that came through there at midnight. But they will be able to tell what cars came through their neighborhood and what the vehicle looks like, which they can always share with the police department. So what I came to the town manager for was say, hey, it's not going to cost us anything. That they want to give us 2 devices to put up in town for 30 days in hopes of us leasing it. It's a win-win. We haven't lost anything. But we all know that crimes are committed most of the times in motor vehicles. So we have great cameras that are capturing these crimes. We have the software that alerting us when the crimes are going on in reference to gunshots. And the only missing piece is, okay, I see a vehicle leaving the area, and I can tell it's a Camaro, but I don't know what type of Camaro it is, and who it belongs to. So this is just another tool to look at our toolbox to see if it's worth investing into it at no cost to the town.
And how many of those are you supposedly?
They're going to ship 2, Mayor. They're going to ship 2. They're going to ship 2 us. We can put one. I can speak with the town manager and council, and we can put one in some of our locations based on our data in town, and we can put another one in a different location to get the best bang for our buck to see after 30 days, hey, is this equipment worth? And then we can have council review and look at it, and we can also at the same time let our community know about these same things. So hey, if we decide not to go with it, maybe some of the neighborhoods in the community would go with it and still share the information.
Question.
Yes.
Is this equipment pretty much tamper-proof? Can people get to it and ruin it some way, or?
But unless they're gonna climb up on that pole pretty high,
It's gonna be hot.
yeah, it's gonna be high on the pole. So it's not gonna be ground level.
Yeah, because the pictures we see, they're pretty much at ground level,
And just to clarify, these would be placed on utility poles. I think what the pamphlet that we have here showing is some of their neighborhood applications where they can be put in smaller neighborhoods if an association or something like that was interested in the equipment. What makes this really enticing for us, in addition to being able to have a trial with the company to see if it really fits Edenton's needs, this is one of the very rare opportunities that we've had by one of these type of equipment providers to have a lease option. Most of these guys really like to try to sell you the equipment, you know, one and done, and then it's yours to deal with. If this is something that we find that's not a good fit for Edenton, rather than thousands of dollars out of pocket lost for something that we no longer use, we would simply return that equipment, simply like we would lease a vehicle or any other type of equipment. And the cost, when we look at it, and the monthly costs associated with these two units, a handful of tickets or vehicles identified would completely surpass the cost occurred on the town. You know, one improper registration or anything along those lines would cover this cost.
Chief, do you know of any community or town in the area that's using this device? You got
Oh, yes, sir. Let me talk about one that's close to home, because they were one of the first agencies in Eastern North Carolina to get it. And they're kind of unique because it's one way in and one way out, but they have solved a lot of crimes, and that is Duck, North Carolina. Down in Duck, they put two at their intersection, and they capture every car coming in and out of town. And any car that's wanted, that's reported stolen, even though it's reported stolen in Durham, when it comes through that license plate reader in Duck, the officers get real-time information about this vehicle is here and a picture of it. Then the officers can start driving in that direction, looking for the vehicle. If there's an amber alert or a silver alert that we receive, like many of us receive on our cell phones, and that vehicle comes in the town and it hits our license plate reader, we're going to know about it. It actually helps us out with alibis. If there's an individual that says, well, I just came from New York. Well, we all have been to New York, most of us in this room. Well, that license plate reader is not connected just to Edenton. I can tell that he came across the Verrazano Bridge or not, because that's all connected. You know, I can see this vehicle wherever it goes with a license plate reader. It ties into all the license plate readers through the Department of Homeland Security.
Chief, does Greenville have this system too?
I don't know if Greenville has it. I know Greensboro Police Department has it.
Chief, what, the license plate is photographed, does that information then go to your department?
Yes, it's stored, and they're gonna, well, for the trial, it's stored based on the retention laws of North Carolina. So they're not keeping it forever. If we don't need it, and then it'll be, automatically deleted. So we have a certain time frame that way, if we need to get the information, then we can house it in the clouds.
There's some sort of alarm if it's a stolen car, or does that automatically trigger something?
Yes, sir. It sends the email and an alert message to all my officers and staff via their cell phones and computers to say, hey, this Ford F-150 green in color that's reported stolen in Durham has just crossed over South Broad and Queen Street. If we have a license plate reader right there.
Does it apply to BOLO notices?
Yes, BOLO notices, human trafficking, anything that is always in it. In fact, it's so detailed that where if I was driving, well, let's just say I had warrants for domestic violence, and I was driving a car in my name, when it hits license plate reader, it also says that this car is in town, and the person that owns the vehicle has warrants.
What about something like an expired license plate or something like that?
Yes, sir. Everything is run through DMV. So like license tags, anything that's wrong with the vehicle, we will be notified with it.
I think it sounds like a great idea, and I appreciate you thinking strategically and bringing us this kind of stuff, because I think this is what makes a difference. And I'm all for it. I can't see how this is anything but a win-win for us.
And
Thank you, Chief Kenny.
Chief, do you have any idea what one of these units would cost if we were to purchase this unit versus the lease? Was there any of those discussions?
No, because what caught my attention when I was talking to the salesman when he came to Edenton was $3,500 a year to lease it. And I said, well, that's not really bad. But what I wanted to do was try to get what we call a T&E. I wanted to try it out. So after negotiating with him, we was able to get two of them for 30 days. So, I mean, in 30 days, we know that Edenton is heavily trafficked. So we strategically put these in a good location in town, so we can get the 30-day data worth of it, and then let's just see, you know, is this something worth for getting, you know, paying $3,500? Because if we lease it, at least again, like the town manager said, you know, 3 years from now, we're really not getting the bang for our buck, then we're not stuck with it. We can just cut the lease off. But if we're progressing, then we know it falls up on the warranty, everything's gonna be working right, not a lot of manpower from the utility guys putting it on the pole, and it's all run off the sun.
The duck people are very happy with it.
Oh, yes, sir, they very are. And you can reach out to your counterparts in Duck, and they can tell you that they saw a lot of break-ins from people coming in out of town, vehicles leaving. And again, it's mostly stolen motor vehicles, because most of the time our criminals, when they going to commit a crime, they're not gonna drive their regular car. They're gonna drive something else.
Well, I agree with, Councilman Simba. I think it's a great idea, especially with the fact that we're gonna get a 30-day free trial on it. I think it's an excellent idea. I guess that's something we need a motion on as well.
So moved. Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Go ahead and get your plate reader.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Keep up the good work, Chief.
Thanks, Chief. Thank you.
Okay, the next thing on our agenda is a resolution for the Lions Club's 85th anniversary. Lions Club Week is June the 13th, and Councilman Miller, I believe you.
Yeah, Mayor, I just want to say in celebration of 85 years of service to the Edenton community, Edenton Lions Club is planning to host a banquet for its members and spouses on Monday, June 13th, to honor this special occasion. A formal resolution from the Edenton Town Council recognizing this milestone would certainly demonstrate support of our club's humanitarian efforts over these many years. And I would just like to make a motion that we approve this resolution.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
As a member of the Lions Club, I just want to say thank you.
And I'm sure Corey will draw up the proclamation or whatever.
We already have it. We just going to make some changes.
We'll take care of it.
You weren't supposed to say that.
A draft. We have a draft.
Okay, now we'll get to our committee meetings, and the first one is our administrative committee.
Thank you, Mayor Stallings. The only matter we have for discussion tonight is the consideration of changing the placement on our agenda of our public comment agenda item. Councilman Coleman and I have been discussing this now for a few weeks, and felt like it was right for consideration of our committee and also eventually for the full council. I have represented the school board for almost 30 years now, and they have had their public comment session near the beginning of the meeting. And I know more than a few other communities do the same. I think Roger did some research and found that Manio, Washington, New Bern, Tarboro, Hosky are some of the public agencies in this area that do the public comment before or near the beginning of the meeting agenda. I didn't know what everybody else's thoughts about it were. The thing that I think jumps out in my mind is many times we are discussing and voting on items and we don't hear the public comment until after we've already discussed it. So it seems to be more logical and orderly if we do consider placing it near the beginning. And I don't know, did you want to add anything to what I just said, Roger, as it relates to that?
I did check with the legal department through the North Carolina League of Municipalities to see if there was any preference or any state laws that would govern when public comment could be held. And there are none, and the majority of towns that do have theirs at the beginning of the meeting, according to the attorney with the league. So that's consistent with what other towns are doing.
But
Councilman
on
Bond.
something that you said there. Most of the things that we vote on, before we take a vote on it, public of importance, public have a choice to speak their opinion on it. Because we don't bring anything up at a meeting and decide on it without giving them time to vote on it. I mean, to speak their mind on it. And a lot of business that we talk about, the public is waiting to hear, to see what comes from the council, and then they can comment on it. If you have it before the meeting, and we make decisions and stuff afterwards, are we gonna allow them a chance to come back and comment again?
I guess conceivably someone could come to the next meeting and tell us how happy they were, how disappointed they were with our decision. And that's a good point, Councilman Bond. The people that I've heard speak their opinion on it seem to be all in favor of moving it up in the agenda and have a preference for that. I haven't had anybody come to me and say, hey, I prefer it at the end.
Can I say one more thing?
You can say as many things as you want to.
I'm seem like I'm the only one talking, but
No, I'm right with you.
but I thought we held these meetings like this to transact business. If we're gonna have public comment and listen to public comment at the beginning, that means that business that we're supposed to take care of is gonna be delayed.
Yeah, you're not thinking that we're recommending that we have public comment at our administrative and this particular committee meetings? You're not, you're
No, but
not
still,
thinking,
No, he's not.
Yeah, okay, I just wanted to
but
make
still
sure.
on our regular council meetings
Yeah.
where we voting and listening to stuff,
and
that means the public comment is gonna come before we
Right.
transact any business.
Right. And my response would be that we would receive the public, as far as the amount of time that it would take, we're gonna be receiving comment, whether we receive it at the beginning of the meeting or the end of the meeting. And I don't think it would add to the time of the meeting or disrupt the meeting.
Depends on how many folks you got that's here to make a public comment.
I understand that.
Are you still keeping it 3 minutes, Leonard?
Absolutely. I mean, we've got to have that.
You call me old fashioned, I'd rather take care of business first and then go to the public part, you know.
That's all, yeah, I think part of our business is, and I don't want to belabor this, is listening. That's a good part of our business is council meetings. And I think a meeting is a time that we get a chance to do that. I mean, that's important, that we.
But don't we do that right now at the end of our business section?
But not if we've already made a decision and we're getting testimony. Last week, I mean, an example, someone was here to testify or express their concern about the trolley pub. The pedal pub that we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
We voted to table it early in the meeting, so that person went home because there's no reason to testify. So when her name was called to testify, she wasn't here because there was, the decision had already been made.
Well, they still have a chance to come back and speak their minds, even if they went home, because it was tabled, right?
Well, but she wanted to speak her mind and they get a chance to do that. Had it been at the beginning of the meeting, she could have stated her concerns and that would have, that at least would have been able to listen and to give her the chance to express those concerns.
Is this staff driven? I mean, did y'all come up with this, or is this something we came up with, and are people really talking about it?
This is
I mean, I guess, did one person talk about it, or is this like, there's been a groundswell of things to change it?
We had received some questions and comments about the location of where the public comment was there within the agenda. And so we thought with us receiving comments as well as some of the councilmen that are here tonight, that we would bring it back up to the group to kind of decide on where the placement needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, I've just never had anybody talk to me about it.
And normally, a lot of times when we're discussing items, at least as far as the administrative committee, we kind of look around and see that there's a general consensus. And I normally make the motion as chair of that committee that we move it forward to full council with the recommendation that we approve it. And here, it doesn't appear right now that we may be able to get a consensus for me to feel comfortable making that motion. And my motion may be, I'm not making it yet, but my motion may be that it just go to full council for a vote without any recommendation from our subcommittee. Because do you have some concerns about it?
I mean, I don't know, I mean, I'm not really sure, I mean, I'd really like to see what, you know, I mean, you mentioned some towns, I'd like to sort of see what the general consensus is of small towns, how they do it, I mean, it's.
Do they like it?
Yeah, I
Do
mean,
they not
just-
like it?
yeah, I
What
mean,
problems
I'm
they're
not
having?
saying I'm particularly against it, it's just, you know, I've just never seen that as a broken, something's broken around here.
I don't see it as broken
The
either.
commissioners, how they doing?
They're,
The commissioner?
you know, really,
County
truly,
commission.
Yeah, they do.
it doesn't matter to us what other towns do in this situation.
The county commissioners are doing it now.
I don't care what the county commissioners do, it doesn't matter.
Which what our wish is and whatever the vote is, I mean, everybody can give their input. And so I'm not comfortable making the recommendation that it go forward necessarily with the recommendation of approval. I am now making the motion that we just move it forward for full discussion and vote at our regularly scheduled meeting.
And I'm not saying I'm against it, I just
Mhm.
hadn't really thought about it until tonight.
Well, part of what we do in these committee meetings is sometimes when we don't have a consensus, the 2-week period gives us time to talk about it and figure out what our actual vote will be.
Maybe we'll hear from the general public.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately that is the underlying goal here as representatives, that the town residents would reach out to their representative to speak their voice. And I think one thing that we have saw is that our public comments have shifted in some regards as far as the content. And so I think there's some revisions there, but I don't know completely what the answer is yet.
Well, you know, I mean, we have it on this TV, we have people that can zoom in, and then we have that period of time, you know, we talk about stuff here, and then we get, at least when I walk down the street, I get everybody's opinions of people that, you know, listen to them, and then we vote, I don't know, you know. So, I'm not
The
saying.
most frustrating part is when you want somebody to give their opinion after we've discussed it for 2
And they
years
won't.
and we've already voted on it, and they want to, you know, go on Facebook or whatever and
You know
complain
that
about
about
it.
that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll make the motion that we simply move it forward for further discussion and vote at our June meeting.
Okay.
Now, second.
Okay?
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and further discussion. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
And Mayor Stallings, that completes our administrative committee meeting.
All right, and the next committee is our finance committee, that's chaired by Councilman Dixon.
So we have a draft budget that staff has worked very hard on, thank you to both of y'all. And we're reviewing it this week. We have not reviewed it as a committee yet, the finance committee has not met. We're doing that this week. I mean, you want us to just send this forward with the caveat that
There's no action.
there's no action, okay?
Tonight was just to share this information with mayor and council as far as the dates, as well as the dates that the public will be able to preview and review this upcoming annual budget. So we,
And the finance committee is gonna meet and review the budget, and then it'll be put on the website
yes.
and in the Joy and Herald as well.
So the initial draft will be available starting Thursday in the Chowan Herald, and it will run for the following 3 weeks. And it will also be online up until our public comment period, which will be on the 14th. We will actually vote on the 22/23 fiscal year budget at our last meeting in June, which I think is the 27th. And so we did want to share this information with mayor and council as well as the public that may watch watch this, that it will be available starting Thursday. But we will have our finance committee work session with council tomorrow.
Okay. I want to thank Virginia for all the work she's put
Yeah.
into this. Virginia, good job.
Thank all for coming in.
Really.
Join that, I know, right actually.
She did an outstanding job, you know, unguided for the first year with the new manager, that understood the expense side versus the revenue side. I could not be happier. She has been amazing to work with and did an outstanding job.
I mean, considering the number of line items, it's amazing how much she did.
Y'all did a great job, and thank you from the finance committee. So that's all we got.
Okay, the next is a utilities commission, and that's chaired by Mr. Bond.
So that's my daddy. We've got one item on this tonight, Mayor. It's a proposed CG2 rider for the solar customers. The gentlemen or the group that was asking for this, there's some questions or doubt about some language in it about expensive. They're not satisfied with that. And since Corey was in on it on the beginning, could you explain what's going on and let us hear about it?
Sure. So we did get an initial draft together for the CG2 rider. Myself and the electric director have been working with the folks from Electric Cities on this. I've also met with a handful of the customers that were interested in the solar options, of which I spoke with one of the gentlemen today. And after we spoke and after Councilman Bond and I spoke earlier today, our staff recommendations are for us to meet with the group next week to explore some options as far as what the number should be, taking into consideration some of our smaller generating customers versus our larger generating customers. So at this time, the staff recommendation for us would be to table this until we have that meeting with those customers to try to iron out some of the final details.
And there are not any hard and fast deadlines or any requirements or anything like that. It's a work in progress.
No, and what I really see, separate from the financial piece here as a win is really the opportunity to have the correct diagram, which would show that the customers that we are interested in allowing them to generate, store, and consume their own at-home produced power. We can iron out all the financial details at a later date. So I don't think it's all bad. Just one or two items just to navigate, and I think we'll be ready to make the recommendation before July 1.
Okay, so you can meet with them next week?
Yes, we will meet next week.
Okay. Well, now that's gonna do me.
Okay, and that
Thank you, Corey.
concludes our meeting. We are adjourned.